They say a man alone is a man forgotten, but what if he's not lost? What if he's sharpening? No applause, no one waiting at the door, no messages lighting up his phone. And yet he wakes with clarity, he moves with weight. He doesn't chase, because he's finally building in silence. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's not about rejection. It's about the man who stays in the quiet long enough to hear his own voice. The man who stops needing to be seen and starts becoming the kind of man no one can ignore. So if you've been walking alone wondering if it means something's wrong, this video is for you. Because the longer a man is single, the more dangerous he becomes. Let's start with a hard truth. Loneliness isn't the villain we've made it out to be. No one teaches men how to be alone. They teach us how to succeed, how to win, how to impress. But they don't teach us what to do when the party ends. The phone stops buzzing and no one's looking for you. So when solitude finally comes, we panic. We call it depression, we call it failure. We treat being alone like a disease when in fact, it's a decision, a turning point. And the man who embraces it early, he gains something most men will never have control over: his mind. Here's where the script breaks from the typical narrative. Society says you should always be seen, always be liked, always have someone in your bed, or at the very least in your notifications. But that craving to be visible, to be constantly in motion, is what makes most men fragile. Because the moment that noise stops, they fall apart. They don't know who they are without external attention. And worse, they've never learned how to build themselves from the inside out. But let's flip this. Let's imagine a man who doesn't fear solitude. A man who looks at an empty calendar and doesn't see failure but freedom. A man who sits with his own silence, not because he was forced to, but because he chose to. Now that's a dangerous man. Why? Because he's not distracted, he's not chasing, he's watching, listening, sharpening. While the average guy is swiping right at 2 a.m., this man is up early journaling his thoughts. He's questioning his habits. He's reworking his beliefs, not based on what's trending, but based on what's true to him. I had a client, let's call him Elijah. After going through a tough breakup, he told me he felt invisible. No more texts, no more invitations, just silence. At first he hated it. He tried to distract himself with new apps, short-term flings, even toxic friendships. Anything to not feel that void. But then one day he cracked, and instead of running from the emptiness, he leaned in. He deactivated his socials. He started taking long walks without headphones. He began to cook for himself again. Not to post on Instagram, just to eat better, to live better, to be better. That 6-month period of self-imposed solitude, it changed everything. He started lifting with purpose. He read philosophy. He began writing just for himself. And when he re-entered the world, people felt the difference. His energy wasn't needy anymore. He didn't look around the room for approval. He became the man who others looked to, because he had taken his loneliness and turned it into a launch pad. Solitude isn't just about not dating, it's about reclaiming bandwidth. The emotional energy you were giving away to women who didn't value you, to friends who only came around when they needed something, to bosses who never saw your potential. You take all that energy back and you pour it into yourself. You build routines, you rebuild your mind, you reflect, not react. You start asking the dangerous questions. What do I really want out of life? What kind of man do I admire, and how close am I to becoming him? Who have I been living for up until now? And then, everything starts to shift. The man who is not afraid to be alone is the one no one can control. Because once you're not driven by attention, you become driven by clarity. Stillness is underrated, and in the modern world almost feared. We glorify hustle, we celebrate noise, we scroll, swipe, refresh, because silence feels like weakness. But in truth, stillness is not the absence of action, it's the sharpening of intention. And when a man learns how to sit still, really still, he starts to forge something no one else can give him: inner gravity. You see, most men live their lives in reaction. A notification pings, they reply. A woman leaves, they chase. A boss critiques, they spiral. It's constant motion, but never true movement. And that's why they never build anything solid, not in their minds, not in their values, not in their direction. They're busy but never deliberate. But something changes when a man stops reacting and begins sitting with the storm. Stillness is a forge, not a spa. It's not soft, it's not comfortable, it doesn't feel like peace in the beginning. In fact, it often feels like war. Because when you sit in silence, all the voices you've been avoiding come out to speak. You should have spoken up in that meeting. You're not as disciplined as you pretend to be. You ghosted someone who actually cared. You've been avoiding the work. That's not peace. That's the fire. But if you can hold steady, something incredible begins to happen. The fire doesn't burn you, it refines you. Let me share a story. There was a man named Kay. I worked with him as a performance coach for nearly a year. Kay was successful on paper. Great job, decent physique, charming personality. But inside chaos. Every time life got quiet, he panicked. He always had to be doing something. Texting, dating, posting, planning. He told me, if I'm not active, I feel like I'm wasting time. But in truth, the busyness was a distraction from himself. So we tried something radical. We stripped away the noise. No podcasts, no music in the car, no phone in the bedroom. 2 hours every weekend, total silence. At first he hated it. He said it made him feel uncomfortable in his own skin. But by month 3, something clicked. He said, for the first time in years, I had a thought that felt like it actually came from me, not just something I saw online. That's what stillness does. It clears the fog and then hands you a mirror. And it's not just about introspection. Stillness reclaims your power of presence. In stillness, you learn to observe without reacting, speak only when necessary, say no with calm authority, sit in rooms without needing to dominate them. Your presence starts to feel heavier, not because you're louder, but because you're rooted. In a world full of men performing, proving, pleasing, a man who is grounded in stillness becomes unshakable. And that's rare. Because stillness doesn't just sharpen your thoughts, it strengthens your standards. You start to notice who drains you. You recognize which goals are actually yours and which are just social pressure in disguise. You feel your energy leaking into pointless conversations, meaningless scrolling, empty approval seeking. And when you finally stop leaking, you start building. Stillness isn't where life pauses, it's where your real life begins. Because when a man stops running, he starts rising. He begins to wake with clarity, speak with weight, and move through life like someone who doesn't just exist, but someone who commands space. There's a type of addiction that no one talks about. It doesn't ruin your liver, it doesn't crash your car. But it kills something far more important, your identity. It's the addiction to approval. And most men are hooked before they even know it. From the moment we're boys, we're trained to seek validation. The gold star in school, the pat on the back from dad, the compliment from a girl, the likes on a post, the nod of approval from a boss. And over time we learn something dangerous, that our worth is measured by how others respond to us, not by how deeply we understand ourselves. So we shapeshift. We adjust our tone to avoid conflict. We laugh at things that don't amuse us. We over-explain to people who aren't really listening. We say yes when every part of us is screaming no. Why? Because somewhere deep down we've equated being liked with being safe. But here's the truth. Approval is a drug that keeps your true self sedated. And like any high, it fades fast. The more you rely on it, the more you need it. The more you chase it, the less authentic you become. That's why men who are addicted to approval often feel hollow even when they're surrounded by applause. They've built a life that looks good but doesn't feel right. There's a guy I mentored once, Chris, 2 outsiders. He had it all, 6-figure job, charming, stylish, always the center of attention. But privately, he was burning out. He told me, I feel like I'm performing all day. I don't even know what my real opinion is anymore. He wasn't addicted to drugs or alcohol. He was addicted to staying relevant, addicted to being liked, addicted to avoiding disapproval at all costs. We did something radical. We started what I now call an approval detox. It went like this. No social media for 30 days, not just no posting, no checking, no likes, no stories. No yes without intention. Every time he agreed to something, he had to ask, do I actually want this? Or am I trying to be polite? 1 truth a day. Every day he had to speak 1 uncomfortable truth to someone, even a small one. And here's what happened. The first week withdrawal, he felt restless, afraid he was missing out, afraid people would forget him. But by week 3, a shift began. He started noticing how often others dodged their own truth, how many people lived on autopilot, smiling just to keep the peace. And in contrast, Chris began to slow down. His voice got deeper, his body language more grounded. He stopped over-explaining. He stopped apologizing for having boundaries. Here's the lesson. When you detox from approval, you start to hear your own voice again. It's quieter than the crowd, less flattering, more honest. But once you reconnect with it, you stop looking outward for permission to live. You start showing up for life on your own terms. You stop texting just to not be forgotten. You stop laughing to fit in. You start honoring your energy. And maybe most importantly, you begin to respect yourself. Because a man who respects himself doesn't need a crowd. He doesn't explain every decision. He doesn't fear being misunderstood. He leads quietly and people feel it. Not because he asks for attention, but because his presence carries weight. That's the paradox. The moment you stop performing to be seen is the moment you become impossible to ignore. Approval is not love. It's a currency you'll spend your identity to earn detox from it, and you get your soul back. There's a moment in every man's life when the noise dies. The message is slow, the weekends go unplanned, and the silence feels deafening. At first you resist. You look for something to fill it. You binge. You scroll. You overthink. You wonder, am I becoming invisible? But if you don't run, if you sit in it, you'll discover something hidden in the quiet clarity. We live in a world where distraction is constant. Noise isn't the exception, it's the default. And in that chaos, most men build lives that aren't truly theirs. They chase careers because their peers did. They marry because the clock said so. They buy cars, join gyms, follow trends, not because they chose to, but because they never slowed down long enough to ask, what do I actually want? That's where solitude becomes more than isolation. It becomes recalibration. When a man finally steps back, no deadlines, no people-pleasing, no pressure to perform, he begins to see what's real and what's just noise. Let me give you an example. There's a man I coach named Min, a startup founder in his late 30s. His life looked perfect on the outside. Funding raised press features, a high-rise condo. But something wasn't sitting right. He said, I've hit every milestone, but I don't feel present in any of them. I told him to unplug. For 21 days, he canceled all non-essential meetings. No networking, no social media, and the hardest, no reaching out to women just to feel alive. He walked, he cooked, he journaled every morning asking one question. What part of my life is truly mine? By day 15, he had a realization. He had built a company that solved a problem, but not one he cared about. He had stayed in a relationship because it looked good, not because it felt good. He was busy living a life that belonged to everyone else. That's what solitude reveals, not just what's broken, but what's not even yours to begin with. The goals, the image, the lifestyle. You begin to see how much of your identity was built through imitation, not intention. And that's where clarity is born. In solitude, your mind slows. You stop reacting and start observing. You notice how certain people drain you. You realize some of your goals no longer excite you. You feel the tension in conversations where you used to fake enthusiasm. You catch yourself about to say yes, then stop. This is the subtle, silent transformation that noisy men never experience because clarity doesn't yell, it whispers. It says, you don't need that friendship anymore. This job is killing your spirit. You're not being honest about what you want in a partner. You've been performing your masculinity, not living it. And once you start hearing that voice, you can't unhear it. It starts guiding you. You wake up not to survive, but to direct. You build routines that match your purpose, not your anxiety. You become more selective with your energy. You let go not out of bitterness, but because you've outgrown the illusion. But here's the most powerful part. When you gain clarity, you also gain peace. Not peace because life is perfect, but peace because you're finally aligned. You stop arguing with people who will never understand your path. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop performing for applause you no longer need. You just live and let your life speak for itself. Solitude isn't about cutting yourself off, it's about cutting away what's false. Clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from finally doing you. There comes a moment in every man's life when he gets tired, but not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. I'm talking about soul fatigue. Tired of proving, tired of performing, tired of chasing people, outcomes, approval. And in that exhaustion, a quiet truth emerges. What if everything I've been chasing isn't even what I need? Let's be honest, modern masculinity has been hijacked by a performative chase. You're told to chase success, chase love, chase status, chase relevance. And if you're not chasing something, anything, you're falling behind. But here's the truth. Nobody wants to admit chasing is often a trauma response. It's a subconscious way of saying, I don't believe I'm enough, unless I prove it constantly. Think about this. How many times have you reached out to someone just because you feared being forgotten? How often have you agreed to plans that drained you just so you wouldn't be left out? How many goals have you set, not because you wanted them, but because they sounded impressive? The chase isn't about desire, it's about deficiency. It's the belief that you have to earn your right to exist, to be respected, to be chosen. And that belief is killing your peace. Let me tell you about Marcus, a man who used to be in a constant race. Marcus had the resume, the social life, the body, the car. But behind closed doors he was restless. Every day he felt like he was sprinting not towards something, but away from something. When he came to me, I asked one simple question. If no one was watching, would you still live like this? That question broke him. He admitted, I don't even know what I want anymore. I only know what gets a reaction. So we stopped everything. No new goals, no networking, no romantic pursuit, just stillness. In that pause, he discovered something radical. His value wasn't in how much he could attract. It was in how little he needed to. Because that's what happens when you stop chasing, you rise. Your energy shifts from seeking to setting. You stop moving with desperation and start moving with direction. You no longer text just to stay relevant. You stop flirting for validation. You stop speaking to fill silence. You no longer panic when someone doesn't pick you. Instead, you build. You build your body not to impress, but because strength is sacred. You build your mind not to debate, but because clarity is your anchor. You build your values and finally start living by them. And people notice. There's a subtle shift in your presence. You don't say much, but when you do, it lands. You're not in every room, but when you enter one, it pauses. You don't ask to be seen, but somehow you're unforgettable. Why? Because men who chase are replaceable, but men who set their own pace become the ones everyone else tries to keep up with. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. You're not better than others. You've simply stopped begging for belonging. You know who you are, you know what you're building, and most importantly, you know what you will never chase again. Not because you gave up, but because you finally woke up when you stopped chasing. You stopped leaking your power. You stop explaining your worth. You stop asking for permission to be seen. And that's when you truly rise. When a man begins to rise, there's one final test. Can he cut? Not with rage, not with drama, but with precision. Because growth doesn't just happen by adding things. It happens when you remove what no longer belongs. Most men are overwhelmed not because their lives are too complicated, but because they're carrying things they should have let go of years ago. That friendship built on guilt, not respect. That career path chosen by their parents, not themselves. That woman who feels like home but also like a trap. That hustle that looks impressive but empties their soul. We're taught to tolerate, to keep peace, to maintain harmony. But peace without truth isn't peace, it's paralysis. Cutting the noise doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming clear. It's about asking brutal, beautiful questions. Why am I still in this group chat I dread? Why do I keep saying yes to meetings that drain me? Why do I feel guilty when I put myself first? Most people don't ask these questions. They float through life anesthetized by routine, tolerating noise until they forget what silence sounds like. But the man who cuts with precision, he remembers, he chooses. Let me share a story that illustrates this. A friend of mine, let's call him David, was running a creative agency. He had 3 big clients, a solid team, and decent revenue, but he was miserable. Every week was firefighting. Every client was a headache. Every Sunday night felt like death. And when I asked him why he didn't let one go, he said, because I don't want to lose momentum. But here's what he was really afraid of. Disappointing people. Not failing, being disliked. Eventually he reached a breaking point and let go of his biggest client. The one that paid the most, the one with the most drama. And what happened? He got quieter, but more focused. Less busy, but more profitable. He had fewer calls, but deeper work. That's the power of precision cutting. You're not meant to be everything to everyone. You're not meant to carry every connection, every expectation, every invitation. Some things you outgrow, some people you outgrow, and that's okay. In fact, that's essential. Let's be clear. This isn't about cutting emotionally, it's about cutting energetically. If something drains you, even if it looks normal or safe, you have to question it. Energy is your most valuable currency, and every leaky bucket in your life is a tax on your future self. Here's the truth. You can't be a man of vision if you're weighed down by obligations that no longer align. You can't walk with power if you're dragging relationships out of nostalgia, not purpose. You can't rise with clarity if your daily life is filled with noise disguised as connection. Cutting out the noise isn't cruel. It's compassionate because it frees everyone, including you. And once you make those cuts, something amazing happens. Your time expands, your presence deepens, your mind clears. Suddenly you don't need reminders, you don't need alarms. You know where to go and who to avoid. This is what Stoics called living by nature, not the trees, the essence living by design, not by default. Cutting noise doesn't make you ruthless, it makes you ready. You're no longer available for things that dilute you. You choose alignment over approval. And from that space you operate with power, peace, and precision. Most men live at the surface. They chase surface-level success, maintain surface-level friendships, engage in surface-level conversations. Even love for many remains shallow. Conditional performative. But here's the paradox: in a world addicted to appearances, the man who develops depth becomes unforgettable. So what does it mean to become a man of depth? It means you stop living for the next thing, the next weekend, the next compliment, the next dopamine hit. Instead, you become rooted. Like an ancient tree, you start growing downward first. Your strength isn't in your noise, it's in your foundation. But that kind of man isn't created by accident. He's forged slowly, painfully, intentionally. Depth doesn't come from reading quotes or watching self-help videos. It comes from confronting yourself when no one's watching. It comes from saying no to a woman you're physically drawn to because the connection isn't right. Letting go of a job that pays well but costs your soul. Choosing solitude over empty socializing. Speaking a hard truth when silence would have been easier. Depth is a choice, not a gift, and few men make that choice because it requires discomfort. Let me share a story. There was a man named Julian, a client but also a friend. He had what many would call good problems. Too many women were interested. Too many clients wanted his time. Too many offers came in weekly. But beneath it all, he was hollow. He told me, everything in my life looks rich, but nothing feels real. So he stripped everything away. We paused dating, cut his schedule in half, and every day for 30 minutes he sat in silence and wrote down one thing. What would I do if I wasn't afraid of losing anything? Within weeks, patterns emerged. He realized he was dating out of ego, working with clients out of guilt, staying busy out of fear of irrelevance. That's when his depth began to form. Not because he became smarter, but because he became honest. See, here's the thing. Depth doesn't look impressive on Instagram. It doesn't get instant validation. It can't be captured in a highlight reel. But when you walk into a room, people feel it. They can't explain it, but they listen when you speak. They lean in because you're not trying to convince them of anything. You're just rooted, and that energy is rare. A man of depth doesn't need to shout. His silence carries weight. He doesn't need to chase. His energy attracts the right people and quietly repels the wrong ones. He doesn't need to argue. His clarity makes noise irrelevant. Depth shows up in small details. The way he listens, not to respond but to understand. The way he holds his boundaries, not with force but with certainty. The way he walks away, not to win but because peace matters more than pride. And here's the hidden reward. The deeper you go within yourself, the higher the quality of people you begin to attract. Because real recognizes real. A shallow life may attract attention, but a deep life earns respect. And when you start living with depth, you don't just impact people, you shape them. Your presence gives others permission to slow down, to breathe, to be real, to stop performing. You stop being a man who impresses. You become a man who awakens. Depth is built in silence. It's measured by what you say no to, by how still you can be in chaos, and by how honestly you live when no one else is looking. There was a time when you were overlooked. You walked into rooms and no one noticed. You spoke and people talked over you. You showed up hoping to be seen, but you weren't. You were invisible. Not because you had no value, but because you hadn't yet stepped into it. You hadn't yet owned it. You were still asking for permission to take up space. But here's what no one told you. The world doesn't ignore you because you're small. It ignores you because you act like you don't belong. And once you stop waiting to be chosen, once you choose yourself, everything shifts. Not instantly, not loudly, but undeniably. You stop showing up to be accepted. You show up because you have something to offer. This is the final transformation from invisible to unshakable. Not because you scream louder, but because you stand still when others flinch. You're no longer led by emotion, you're led by principles. You're no longer reactive, you're anchored. You no longer perform, you embody. Let me show you this through a real-life moment. A man I worked with, T, once told me, I used to chase every woman who gave me attention because I didn't know what it felt like to be chosen by myself. That line hit me hard, because most men don't even realize they're doing it. They think it's ambition, they think it's confidence, but it's desperation in disguise. T did the work. He chose himself quietly every day. And 2 years later, I saw him speak on stage. No fancy suit, no motivational tricks, just calm weight clarity. And you know what people said after? I don't know what it was about him, but I couldn't stop listening. That's unshakable. Being unshakable doesn't mean being perfect. It means you're no longer moved by things that used to control you. A woman leaving doesn't break you. A friend misunderstanding you doesn't shake your peace. A slow month doesn't trigger panic. You don't react, you respond, you don't doubt, you discern. You've seen what's fake, you've faced what's painful, you've stood in your own silence and then survived it. And now no one can move you. It's not that the world suddenly loves you, it's that you no longer need it to. You've become your own compass. You've become your own validation. You've become your own standard. When a man stops trying to prove himself and starts living from a place of quiet, knowing he doesn't disappear, he becomes undeniable. So you've walked through the silence, you've sat in the stillness, you've stopped the chase, you've cut the noise. And now here you are. You didn't just survive solitude. You built something in it. Something rare. Something unshakable. Yourself. And here's the truth that most men never realize. You were never meant to be constantly busy. You were never meant to be constantly seen. You were meant to be grounded, measured, quiet, intentional. But in a loud world, a still man feels like a threat. Because he can't be manipulated. He can't be baited into conflict. He doesn't perform for applause. He moves because it's time, not because the world tells him to. And so now that you've arrived here, you have a choice. You can go back to the noise, the swipes, the endless notifications, the subtle approval addiction that whispers, "Please like me." Or you can stay here not in isolation, but in alignment. Not in withdrawal, but in reclamation. You reclaim your time. You reclaim your values. You reclaim the parts of you that were traded for validation, sex, social status, or comfort. Let me give you one final image. Picture a man walking down a crowded street. Everyone's rushing, talking, reacting, consuming. But this man, he's different. He's not loud, he's not distracted, he's not in a hurry. He walks with weight. He's built something no one can see, but everyone feels. He doesn't explain himself, he doesn't prove himself, he simply is. That's the man who's done the work. That's the man who has earned his silence. That's the man who used solitude as a forge, not a prison. And that can be you. But don't mistake this for a finish line. This isn't a 10-step system. This isn't a transformation you post online. This is a practice daily, quiet deep. And it starts with one decision. I no longer run from myself. If you've made it this far in the video, it means something inside you is waking up, not some fake alpha energy, not some shallow win-at-all-costs mindset, but something real, something ancient, a fire that doesn't scream but sustains. You've tasted solitude, now let it shape you. Let it make you precise. Let it make you rooted. Let it make you dangerous, not to others, but to the parts of you that used to settle. Stillness is not the end. It's the beginning of something powerful. A life lived from center. A presence that doesn't ask but declares, a man who no longer seeks but embodies. If this message resonated, then write it down, somewhere private. Somewhere only you will see. Write this. I choose stillness to build strength. I choose solitude to remember who I am. And if you're ready to keep going, not chasing, not performing, but becoming, you already know what to do. Subscribe, comment, return here when the world gets too loud. Because we're not building noise, we're building men.